Hey guys, I'm Chris,
And I'm Mike.
and welcome to No Limits, the Scot Harvath Podcast, part 1 of the final episode. I did say in the last episode that was going to be the penultimate. I lied. We decided we really want to give this final episode, its due diligence, its justice that it deserves. And we thought we were going to do this anyways, where we were going to sort of talk all the books back and forth to each other, just a brief, kind of refresh ourselves. I think we did this something similar with the Mitch Rapp Pod. But why not just make that part 1? Then we can kind of think about it, come back, record our full episode. Because I want to, now that I'm looking at these scores, it's going to be tough. And I'm going to have to think about it because, yeah, the scorecard is great. And in our first series, we gave it letter grades, and that is another way to grade. But I have a lot of books that are, 44 and a half, 43 and a half. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 books of that score. I don't know how the hell I'm going to pick those out without having to do a mini revisited. So I think let's just go through each book. We've just done Lions of Lucerne, Path of the Assassin. I don't necessarily think we have to go into those, but let's go into the other. How many books are we up to?
Edge of Honors will be 24. 24, yes. 23 books here.
Yeah, we're one off from the year.
Yeah. Well, welcome to the finale. Yeah, you're right. Let's split this thing into 2 parts because last night I was putting some notes together because I didn't want to give my final rankings. It was such a hard choice to make until I refreshed myself on all the books. So I took all the books that I didn't quite remember and was looking up our old notes for them and even listening to snippets of our podcast. And so much was coming back to my mind that if we wing this thing and didn't put in the proper time and research, like you said, give it its do our due diligence, I think we would have overlooked a lot. And this series deserves a great finale after we've picked it apart. We've read every book. I want to make sure we hold on to the good. I want to find those really great nuggets, even if they're in books that I largely forgot about, like rereading Path of the Assassin. We weren't that high on it recently when we revisited it, but we pulled out 2 action scenes, which are absolutely on my list to fight for top action scenes in the whole series.
100%.
And that was in a book I almost largely forgot and just wrote off and told myself I didn't like. So I think there's a lot of gems to be found. And I think today we'll refresh ourselves and just have a open discussion on each of the books and go through them in order.
Sounds good.
State of the Union.
So this one really sticks out to me. I think because, following a path, and was really intrigued to see where Brad was going to go next, and to have him go into this Cold War era. We get a lot of Gary Lawler in this book. A lot of the Herman the German, which is going to be a character that pops up. Not only here, he was already in the book in Lions, right? Yeah. But he shows up again later on. This the Lydica pub is going to play a role in multiple books going forward. So it's a true. It sets the stage for the lore of this universe that Brad is going to be able to pull from, whenever he can. I think it was so cool and it worked that it warranted him going back there multiple times. You know what I mean?
Yep. And what a bounce back from the second book, Doldrums. 100%. What a bounce back. State of the Union. As much as Lions of Lucerne was very important for Brad's career, I would say State of the Union maybe is almost equally as important because it just bounces back from all the problems we had with Path and does it in a brilliant way. Cold War, like you said. Once we met Gary Lawler in Lions of Lucerne, he was this old-timey FBI guy, but you knew he was a great operator in his day. Well, let's see that. And now we have him up against Helmut Draeger. I forgot about Helmut Draeger.
Cool.
He's up there for one of the best villains. And having a backstory with Gary where Gary Lawler's wife, Heidi, she recruited spies with him in East Berlin. Love to see that book. She was killed by the Stasi when Helmut worked for them. So Gary then in this book, or at some point blows him up, disfigures him, leaves him to die. After the attack, he knows he's not dead, but Gary turns his back on him. And now a disfigured Helmut Draeger is coming back from the grave and driving this plot with the tactical nukes. Wow. That's a banger of a storyline.
Yeah, and then, we just continue to build upon these characters from the other two novels, getting more Gordo, more Morel, Hollenbeck, Longo, Skip. I think, this is truly, we're beginning to see some of Brad's, tropes, or, like what he's going to want to do, these team ups, these mini, like little team ups, not that he has the same cast and crew in every book, but he's going to pull these characters that he finds interesting. And obviously we know now that he has this role. Well, he didn't have it then, but, has this Rolodex, this now a real Rolodex of index cards of these characters that he can just pull out and be like, all right, how do I want to mess with this character? Alexandra,
yes,
critical, Scott, one of Scott's ladies in this novel,
but of a different variety, a different species. Yeah. She's an equal operator for the Russians, but she has a conscience, and I think that's so cool to let linger, that she's out there somewhere. She saves Scott, and then he saves her. I think there was something, I don't know if it was a boat, but one of them pulls the other in, or they both have this mutual understanding, even though they're on opposite sides. Like the Russians are launching, putting these tactical nukes out in America somewhere, but she doesn't want them to go off. So even defying orders to work with the opposition, Scott, to make sure that nukes don't go off. And then she disappears, and we know she's out there. What a great plant that then comes back later in the series. Like you said, they go back to the Lydica pub multiple times later in the series. I think it's Brad, as much as he developed a voice in Lions of Lucerne, that voice is now being nurtured and grown in State of the Union, while he's also planting seeds to do things 5, 10, 15 books later. That makes State of the Union a very, very important book. Not to mention, what edge of your seat action, or even suspense, I will say, in Congressional Cemetery, when the bombs are in the crypt. I remember reading that, and that was one of those you cannot put this book down moments.
Yeah, that's one of the best, like, suspenseful, like, portions of a novel, like, in the entire series.
I remember even saying, like, I'm done with the whole, there's a nuke that's going to go off, we have to go find it and save the world trope. How many times has that been done in storytelling? But here
it was done a little differently. Yeah,
it was so different because of Alexandra, the Russians, Helmut Draeger, Gary's background. Really, really well done, well-crafted story. Even though it's kind of relying on an old trope, you're doing it in your own new way. And the OIAA, this is really Scott's first mission. Yeah, Scott and Gary's first time really going rogue. He's employed by the Secret Service, but the president has him doing these other missions. Well, now it's official. They're going to have their own deep cover group, probably buried in USAID somewhere, funded by funds for agricultural programs in Bangladesh. But Gary Lawler and Scott are using it to kick Russian ass. It's all too true, man. Brad wrote about this in 2004.
All right, 2005, Blowback.
Okay, and then the next one is Takedown.
Next one, 2006, Takedown. Is there anything good we can say about Blowback? I just remember Blowback as the plague, like, with Alexander the Great, right?
Yeah. Oh, they had a name for it too.
Or was it Hannibal?
It was Hannibal. Oh, there was a name for the plague, which was actually kind of a creative name, but it also was just pure silliness. But I think looking back on it, that's Brad kind of playing in the sandbox of, he likes to do these historical.
Sure.
Steve Berry, like, oh man, I wish we read some Steve Berry.
Yeah, we need to read some Steve Berry. But, it's similar to, what's the guy? Angels and Demons. Dan Brown.
Yeah. I think this is Brad flexing his kind of muscle to try things out and be a little Dan Brown, Steve Berry like, but it just doesn't hit. The other thing that maybe worked, there was some cool thing on the Italian-French border. Remember, he and the scientists are looking for fossils or something, and then they have to kind of not jetpacks, hang gliders. Use hang gliders to kind of go off the mountain and over the border to sneak in. Oh, it was called the Sword of Allah, the virus name.
Yeah, because then they had the water, like that. I just
right.
I just want to forget that entire book.
Holy water that's supposed to inoculate Muslims because
no, it's supposed to protect Muslims.
Yeah. For when the disease does get out. Terrible.
2006 Takedown. Brad comes back with one of his best novels.
Sure.
I think to me personally, I don't know if it's in my actual number wise, Takedown is in the top 5, but to me, Takedown is just a special book because of the confoundness of the novel. It's a very tight, compact novel. Like we're used to this traveling, Brad likes to travel heavily, but like here we're on the Isle of Manhattan, right? All the bridges below, and what is one guy who's taken the time off during 4th of July weekend? Like what is this is another, like, you could tell that Brad loves loves a Die Hard. He loves Mission Impossible. Like, what is one guy gonna do? And Bullet Bob, we get the introduction of Tracy. The Troll makes his first appearance. As he's
as a bad guy,
the quote unquote mastermind behind all of this, right?
Right.
The various bomb scenes we get. It's just, I don't know. I love this book so much.
Yeah. I remember that you really liked it, and you were high on this one. I was too. We gave it a really good score. I think scorecard, it was one of my highest. It was also the early days of our scorecard. And I think that largely holds up, but I remember a few things that were rough around the edges. So it wasn't a perfect book, but yeah, it was really cool. It's a fun ride. And again, we saw it develop in State of the Union, these team ups. Scott has to get together this ragtag group from a PTSD kind of Alcoholics Anonymous group, PTSD Anonymous group. And he has to kind of get them to gear back up and go out in the streets of Manhattan with him and get the job done. Even Tracy Hastings, we really, really suspenseful scene on the pressure plates in Grand Central Station.
Right.
Like there were some real gems in there, but rough around the edges because where it ends up with action, there's something about the bad guys are holed up in the Libyan house. And I just remember in this embassy-like building, there's an elevator going up and down, and they put dead bodies in the elevator, maybe grenades under them or something. Or Tracy is being held, or one of them is being held, and Tracy wants to get the guy who disfigured her because the bomb maker's there who ended up creating the bomb because she saw traces in the bomb. She's like, only one person can make a bomb like this. Well, it was cool, but I remember it didn't feel polished. It felt a little raw. Oh, and then they randomly take horses. I think Central Park is the horses get loose and Scott's like riding horse. Oh, and then there's a motorcycle thing. Like he sees a motorcycle gang or goes to a motorcycle shop. There was like a couple little weird things.
Well, it's like when you're in New York. And I imagine it has that feel of like a post-apocalyptic.
It does, yeah.
Likeness to it because you're lost in Manhattan, like trapped in Manhattan, and there's been multiple movies that have done this.
It also felt like Batman,
right? Oh yeah,
felt like
very
the
much
Dark
so.
Knight,
very much so.
Yeah, it almost was playing on tropes of, Escape from New York, The Dark Knight, Mission Impossible. It's like all these things rolled into one.
I remember us not jibing with the Amanda Rutledge, like the president's daughter of it all, like her being on the bridge and like wrong case, wrong time, like that kind of stuff. Again, it's putting too much in when you don't need to.
Yeah,
it
seems like happenstance.
Yeah, one of the best parts about this novel though is the end. We get one of the first like quintessential Brad cliffhangers at the end of a novel, like where you're like, could you imagine like the first time reading this and you have to wait an entire year to get the resolution of like whether or not Tracy's dead? And Bishop's Gate, the
And it's at
description
Bishop's
of
Gate.
Bishop's Gate, like getting the
Yes.
introduction of Bishop's Gate, that's awesome. And the dog, and you
Oh,
think it's
dude.
the troll.
You think it's the troll because he left the package with the dog, but he really did it as a thank you because Scott saved the Arcos or Drago, one of them. He saved one of the dogs in that shootout. The dog was going to bleed out, and Scott stuck around, risked his life to give it, life-saving care, medical attention. So Scott wanted to, the troll wanted to thank him, but as Tracy's picking up the dog from the front stoop, she gets hit by a sniper's bullet. Damn, you're right. That's a cliffhanger.
Then to follow that up with 2007's First Commandment, the book, I just remember this one, the book about the plagues. And to me,
right,
this one, the concept of it was really cool. Like, just having this one character, obviously he's the one who, shot Tracy in the last, or, was involved with the shooting of Tracy in the last book, and to be going after Scott and, going after the people he loved, in various ways, culminating with Meg's wedding and the boat scene, and the fact that this is all being, run by Ari Schoen, because Ari Schoen has this vendetta against Scott, right? Using this villain in that way. What was the villain's name again?
Well, that's where it gets crazy because Broussard.
Oh, he was Abu Nidal's grandson. He was actually like Ari Schoen's, also Ari Schoen's grandson, right?
Right, because Ari Schoen's son and Adara had that affair, which is why he wanted to split them up. But apparently there's a grandson nicknamed Juba the Sniper, who was, remember, a Gitmo detainee, and then he escaped. Right. And so there's all these connections are just out of control. Roll that in with the troll. This is where I think Scott is Brad is really trying to maybe fit together the jigsaw pieces that just don't need to go together. Like, you almost have a piece. There's 3 different jigsaw puzzles, and you just jumble up the pieces and you try putting them together, and they're just kind of crisscrossing and not snapping into place. The troll loved Adara. Broussard was torturing him, I think, before Broussard, became fully independent. He was something about, he had the troll in captivity. He was torturing him. Adara saved him. I don't really get it. I don't remember. It was a little wild.
Remember, one of the things I liked about this book was, I think, like we've said before, like just bringing in these secondary characters. So the Sargasso facility and like the Valhalla group. So Tim Finney and like those early connections that Scott makes, which we never like really hear from them again, like after these couple books. But, Brad doing the work to establish these ancillary characters and having us buy in and really enjoy their presence. This is definitely one of those circumstances.
And I remember at Valhalla with Tim Finney, because he has super secure comms, that's where Scott is in a chat room with the troll.
Right.
And he thinks there's more to the story than that he killed Tracy. And obviously the troll wants to tell him, he had nothing to do with that. So I think I remember that conversation being really on pins and needles of, I know these two are going to become best friends and work together.
Yeah, because we know that. Yeah.
And I'm like, how does that happen? And so that conversation was, they're writing back and forth, cryptic messages. And then all that culminates in Brazil because the troll's on that island. And then I think the troll saves Scott with the flare gun. Scott's supposed to go get him out of this thing. They create a diversion with the boat going in circles in the lake. The helicopter comes in. And I think when Scott doesn't have a weapon, he's pinned down behind that house, the troll pops up, uses the flare gun, saves him. And that really solidifies their relationship. I think there's a scene where they're talking about music, of course. I think the funk kind of kicks off.
This is where the funk kicks off. Yeah. Brad putting in like real places. So the Bucket of Blood bar, the Seal bar in Norfolk, Virginia, where one of the attacks happens. Like, these little, Brad does really good research and puts these little polishing touches. When he does it right, it's really good.
Yep. I think what I'm going to say about the First Commandment is it's a very memorable book, very important book. But the 2 things that were most important to its plot, I didn't care about. Broussard, Juba the Sniper.
Right.
And then also the plagues. And Ari Schoen coordinating the plagues to go after people closest to Scott. Like they even go after his mom, Kate Palmer, Carolyn Leonard, from the Secret Service. And then I think they bring her the dog or somebody gets the dog. And some of the things that drive the plot, like the plagues, I wasn't that interested in, but all the goings on around it were great.
Last Patriot.
Last Patriot.
I think this is the one where we went off on one of our first tangents with Brad and his certain visions he liked to put in his book. I don't know. This to me screamed just very similar to Blowback, like wanting to have this, like you said, what's the other author you want us to read?
Steve
Barry, or a Dan Brown, like wanting to. Essentially, this to me is the Muslim version of
Da Vinci Code, or one of
the
those.
Da Vinci Code. This is the Muslim
and the
Da Vinci
American
Code.
version because of the Thomas Jefferson stuff.
Right, exactly. This is the
You're trying to mash that up.
National Treasure, Da Vinci Code,
meets Da Vinci
Muslim,
Code in
Islam. Like that's what sticks out to me in this book. This is the American Muslim Da Vinci Code, National Treasure.
But a common theme of the early Brad books is you're doing too much. You're stuffing the sausage, way too much, because it's not only Thomas Jefferson and a prophecy from Muhammad that he wrote this final prophecy that everyone forgot. The notes are like scribbled in the margins of a Don Quixote book. And so something about Cervantes being in a prison on the Barbary Coast, and then Jefferson authorizing like special forces to go in and
that takes him to the Naval Academy.
Recover. And then the Naval Academy, and they meet that guy who takes them to Monticello.
Yeah.
And then there's even Osbeck, who ends up being a pretty cool character. But the wheel cipher, and then the clock, and then they need this specialist who they take the clock down, or they use the wheel cipher to determine the text, and then it starts moving a pen. I remember there's like an ink pen that starts moving according to this device. One too many, bro. I talked about liking the puzzles. The puzzles in this book get out of control wacky. Yeah, there's proof that he's trying to do Steve Barry type stuff, because he and Steve Barry were close at this time. They put each other's characters in their books.
Cotton
Malone was in the First Commandment, and I don't remember which Steve Barry book, but he wrote Scot Harvath into it. I remember that. That was so much fun to read that. I was like, oh my God.
I like it when Jack Carr does that a lot, right?
True. Yep.
Matthew Dodd. You have written down here Matthew Dodd. Who was Matthew Dodd?
So I couldn't keep track of this, but this was that storyline, something about a mosque. There was a CIA guy, and there was this Marwan Khalifa, who I think was an imam who was corrupt or in bed with terrorists. I don't remember exactly. I don't remember if Matthew Dodd was on our side or not. I think he was former CIA, but then he went undercover.
He was undercover. It's a very similar story to what we saw
with Sean Chase. Full Black. Sean Chase goes undercover twice.
Right.
Which we're going to get to in the next couple of books.
Okay.
But first is The Apostle. And dude, we're having this little roller coaster. Every other book is a hit.
It's hitting.
It's just hitting. And if Brad writes one where we were a little down on it, he
brings
comes
us right back
with the next one and just blows you away.
The Apostle, again, has a special place in my heart. Like it lives, breathes. Like, to me, a great double read is to put The Apostle next to book 4 of Don Bentley,
Forgotten War.
Forgotten War. Like those two books are just, if you want to be a part of that, to really understand Afghanistan, read those two books back.
I would even say The Last Man by Vince Flynn.
True. Yeah, also.
You put those three together and you have a really great collection of commentary on the time period of the never-ending Afghan war. Great commentary on it from a warrior's perspective, soldier's perspective, political agenda perspective. You're right. Yeah. And this one's even special because Brad went there. Brad was embedded with these guys.
This was the book he did a lot of research for.
Right. We even talked about how some of Brad's misses are when he travels heavy too much. And then when he narrows in on a place like Backlash, narrowed in, one setting, when he does that in The Apostle, just takes you to Afghanistan. He really has that. So he has in his arsenal the traveling heavy, but he also has like traveling tight. Also, great team up. One of the best team ups. Babaji, Gallagher, Hoyt. Remember Hoyt was making all the wisecracks about the Asians?
He had an Asian wife. Yeah, he was an interesting character.
Dude, what an amazing team up.
All of this book is to find a prisoner who was taken.
She works for a nonprofit?
She worked for some nonprofit.
Yeah.
Doctors Without Borders or something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
And then you have this other character, like one of the leaders of the Taliban. And I remember that his brother really stuck out. His brother had special needs.
Yep.
Scott did a very good job at like just giving realism to like the villains in this book.
He humanized people on both sides.
Even though they are bad people, like, there are people that are there that like don't necessarily maybe know that what they're doing, right?
Right. He humanized the villains in a way that was refreshing, because we're coming off some books where the big bad Arab was like seemingly his theme of, well, his words, but also his characters. We came off of a few books where we criticized his "there's only good Muslims and bad Muslims" kind of approach, which he wrote multiple times in the books. And here I think it's a little more sympathetic. You even have very moving scene. You want to get things right. I think Scott goes in on horseback to meet with the elders.
He does, yeah.
And they tell him that the Russians are here, and it's really the Russians who kidnapped this lady, and the Russians want to draw you more into the story. The Russians are going after some gold. That got a little weird. The Lake of Broken Glass, this like diamond mine that the Russians wanted to find and have a pipeline so they could sell energy to Central Asia. That got a little weird, the geopolitical stuff there, but also probably accurate. The Russians have an important history with Afghanistan. Our mission there was tied up very much with what the Russians did in 79, because we supported the early Taliban, the Mujahideen. So I just feel like this one, Brad wanted to get right, and he did.
He did. Very much so.
And let's talk action. Do you remember that chase scene?
The AC-130 gunship scene? Oh.
But even before they get the support called in, their comms are going in and out, and they can't get the connection to call in the firepower. At one point, there's a rolled over, I guess, a Hummer or something, and Scott has to like jump over it, line up the RPG, and run back. Dude, or maybe toss grenades. He's doing all sorts of stuff on this extract. I remember that chase scene was thrilling through the frigid mountains of Afghanistan.
Definitely one of the top action scenes that sticks out in my mind.
Complete. One of the top team ups and one of the top action scenes. Good stuff.
Foreign Influence, 2010, book 9.
Another important book.
Yeah. Introduction of Reed Carlton, the Carlton Group. This is where we make so we're 9 books in, a little less than halfway through, and this is going to be
a shift,
a big shift, right? And, dealings with the troll and, getting more involved with him. I remember this one, huge. We get Padre Peo. We go to Basque Country.
Do you remember sneaking in to find the troll in Basque Country and meet Padre Peo? It was like,
yes,
you have to go to this cafe and get in this taxi, and he drives you, but then you have to get off and go up this trail on the horses through the mountains. You don't know if you're in Spain. You don't know if you're in, France. You don't know, where you are. Like, that was cool. Then you end up with this monastery. Escatatu is the little town. That was really cool.
Yeah, we have the Dominique Fournier, the high-end escort who, definitely played a role in the Trolls past, right?
Yep.
Yep. We get our first introduction of the Athena ladies.
Yes.
With Gretchen Casey.
And I remember they're established in a way you could buy into, because while too many missions, they just have to do sex appeal to try to be the honey trap. Here it was like, they post up in the windows in Amsterdam and they have like the red lights on, but they're really scoping out the streets. That was pretty cool. Yeah.
And then Nikki Rodriguez gets trapped and Scott saves her. Yeah.
Yep. That was cool. This is also the book with Ashford where we think he's on our side from MI5. He's telling about his operations with Reed Carlton. He brings up the nickname Peaches, but he won't tell you where it came from.
Right, which we just found out in Near Dark.
Or Black Ice, but yeah.
Yeah.
So much longer. And so the introduction of Robert Ashford is really big because I think it's the ending of this one.
Yeah, he comes in like halfway through. But the whole time...
it's the ending of the next one when he shoots that RPG and kills the guy in the trunk.
No, it's the ending of this one.
It's the ending of this one?
Yeah. But during the whole book, we're not realizing who... Someone's calling somebody, and we don't know that it's Robert Ashford, right? And so it's at the very end of this book that, after they get the guy, I'm pretty sure that's in the end of this one. It is. Is it at the end of the next one?
No, it has to be this one because in the next one, Full Black, remember that movie producer Solomon? And he has his friend Luke Ralston.
Yes.
They're using Robert Ashford.
Right.
To do their dirty work. And they're the ones he's calling. And they have videotape of him blowing up the guy in the trunk. So I think Scott and the CIA wanted this terrorist. They wanted to debrief him. They wanted him to talk. So they're taking him in a trunk, I think, into MI5 headquarters. Yet Robert Ashford pops up, blows up the car so that this guy can't talk. And then in the next book, Robert Ashford, we realize, was the bad guy, and they have the dirt on him. And all this is going on when Sean Chase is undercover. His name was Rashid in Foreign Influence. He's in the mosque undercover. And then in Full Black, he goes undercover again in Uppsala, Sweden. Remember, he was in that cell and he had to be real careful about every move he made, and in the window curtains, how he put the window shades to tip off Scott.
Yes. Another character we don't ever really see again, right? Like, it's weird how we get the Sean Chase guy and then we have Chase Palmer. I don't know. I guess I confuse the two of them a lot.
I think I was confusing them too.
But no, they're two different characters.
They're two different people. Okay. I was going to say, I think he comes back in Spy Master at least, and a few around there, but that's Chase Palmer. He doesn't die, does he? While he's undercover? Because he gets found out. I remember terrorist leader realizes he's being weird, does the thing with the blinds for the wrong house, since Scott hits the wrong house in Uppsala, Sweden. And that's a shitstorm.
So this book, Full Black, is all about Aziz Ali, but also like Solomon, like this the James Standing character as the George Soros of it all. And Solomon was making this Well Endowed movie about, how he's, controlling everything. And this guy has, isn't this where we have like the different colors, like different
on the map
on like different color attacks?
Because they're going after like Forbes 500 companies. They're going after the big companies to crash the economy. Yeah, in DuPont, your office in Wilmington.
Right, in my office. Yeah.
And the troll finds out on a map what are all these targets, and they're all color coded for the different types of attack. Oh, and they find in DuPont the bombs were like in the pillars.
In the walls,
someone put them in the walls. Yeah. And this is when Nicholas comes into the Carlton group. Moonracer is brought in to do this analysis to help them stop the attack.
Yep. And then at the very end of this, we get another, because this whole time we had the Athena ladies come. We had one of the ex-Athena lady, Riley Turner, with the Carlton group, and she gets killed. Little fling, but she gets killed at the very end of this.
Yeah, but that's also a weird scene. Because she shows up in Paris. She's in an apartment when Scott's going to meet what he thinks is an Israeli spy, but it was a setup that Reed Carlton just wanted him and Riley to have a little time to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I guess he was trying to give him a little R&R. So Scott knocks on the door. She's actually there. He's like, what the hell's happening? And then the bullets start flying. And there's a random assassin who knew about this meetup. A little strange that Reed Carlton would surprise him like that, but
Yeah. Different.
I guess it's a cliffhanger. Like, who's shooting at them? Who set them up? Is
Exactly.
Reed bad? Was Riley Turner bad?
Is Riley dead?
Is Riley dead? Is the Athena Project and the Carlton Group compromised? Yeah.
Blacklist, 2012.
Yeah. Blacklist also does something important. It brings in Nina.
It does.
And I remember it opens with Caroline Romero, who's Nina's sister, escaping the Pentagon City Mall. Remember, she goes into like the lingerie shop because she knows her tail.
The car with like the gift card that like she can play a message and stuff like that. Yeah,
she sends a message, and I think she has a flash drive, and she basically gets the tail off her back. Pretty cool. And then we get a backstory that even though she dies, I think at the end of that escape, her sister 20 years ago saved Nicholas from that bathroom attack. They were at like a hacker conference, like a nerd conference, and he gets in the bathroom into an argument with people. One guy pulls a knife and whatever, and somehow Nina busts in and saves him. And you know what's crazy? I think Edge of Honor is when we have the baby.
Right, exactly.
We might actually meet the baby. Yeah.
I remember this one too, like meeting Tommy Banks. Like this old school mentor of Reed.
Reed's mentor, yeah.
This is the first time that we go to the Blue Door, you know, this mention of the C&O Canal.
Yep.
Yeah, we're starting to like fill out more of like the Reed Carlton backstory. We get more of a backstory on Padre Peo. Padre Peo comes back into this one.
Yep. He was formerly married before being a priest, and wasn't his wife killed?
She was killed in one of the the Madrid bombings or something like that.
One of the bombings. So he decided to, even though he's a priest, to give his work in the shadows for the intelligence agencies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I forgot about Tommy Banks at the Blue Door. I like the lock house as this hideout. Is this the one where the guy's also photographing them?
No, that's later on.
That's later on, yeah. Because we meet at the Blue Door for a little while before it's compromised. Yeah. There's also, I don't know what brings Scott there, but to Monterrey, Mexico, he goes to an orphanage, meets Sister Marta, and turns out Nicholas is funding this orphanage, but he's also spotting talent. I don't remember why they're there, but I remember that being a very human moment of Scott, like really, and I think he's with a woman. I don't know who he's with, but Scott takes to the kids and likes this idea that Sister Marta's doing this, and Nicholas is really a good guy at heart, but Nicholas is always, he's always working. His brain is always involved. That was interesting.
This is the stretch of books where my mind kind of blanks on but I mean, this is why doing this exercise is good.
Yeah, I hope people
bring out the highlights.
Yeah, it's almost like an encyclopedia. And I didn't even plan to do this. I tried doing my rankings and my superlatives of, best characters, best team up, best action, best setting. And there were so many books I couldn't remember. So I was like, let me take some notes and look at how much this is jogging our memories here.
Mm-hmm.
Maggie Rose, McAllen, Texas. Now, this confused me because we already had the Valhalla facility.
Right.
And now we have the Three Peaks Ranch in Texas. Mike Stryber, it was like a farm and he had planes. I don't remember exactly what it was used for, but Nina hides out there.
I think it was either Reed knew them or, it's some sort of connect that Scott
Tommy Banks connected them. Yeah.
Or Tommy Banks. Yeah.
I do remember though, these intruders are coming and Nina shoots them. I remember Nina kind of proved her mettle here. I think Nina and the troll were there. Blacklist, good book, maybe forgettable though in some ways.
Yeah.
Hidden Order. We reached that part of the series where, and Brad tells you it was kind of a mistake looking back, the big box retailers, whatever, your Costco, your Walmart, your Target, they wanted their own version of the book just for them to sell, which had the extra chapter. So I think Hidden Order it was a disservice having all these. What did it have? It had a preface published separately,
preface and an
epilogue too,
yeah,
alternative ending kind of thing. And then actually maybe the biggest sin of this one is the economics lesson. This is the Fed book.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And then trying to do the faction and the history, the Steve Berry of it all, with the Boston Tea Party and the Sons of Liberty. So like we're in Boston, and the killer, assassin, whoever, is like planting bodies along the Freedom Trail. I remember something about Boston early colonial history.
Yeah, but this is the first book we get Laura, right?
True, because Laura's the cop, the detective.
Yeah, in Boston. This is the Boston book. This is what I remember it as.
Yeah.
The Boston book, and as well as the Federal Reserve book. That's what I remember. And then also our first introduction to the whole side story with Lydia Ryan and Bob McGee. Like those are going to be characters that we now have for the next 5-some books. So.
Right. And that was weird because Lydia Ryan and Bob McGee, which was really cool, they were working on a case to overthrow Middle Eastern governments and figure out who's responsible for that. But it had nothing to do with the Fed and nothing to do with like Laura and the Boston attacks. And
yeah, it was the fact that like her partner, Sal Sabatini, was the actual killer. Like,
oh, he was the creepy killer.
Yeah, this was like the whole murder mystery novel too.
Right. And wasn't there that creepy scene with a mask or something?
Yeah, he's wearing a mask. There's like a vat of acid.
Yeah. And he had to mime, like he didn't want to say anything because then you recognize his accent, which part of Boston he's from. And yeah, it was weird. And the whole point of this was the Fed was getting a new chairperson, and there were these 5 candidates, and somebody was knocking them off. I remember Claire Marquardt. She was kidnapped, brought to Jekyll Island, right, and killed.
That's
and
where
she was supposed to be the front runner for the Fed, and they're trying to destabilize, the money supply. All right.
Okay.
One of the worst books.
Yeah, but
1, 2, or 3.
The interesting thing that I think we should do is like when we're ranking them, like, but also, yeah, they're at the bottom, but some of them are important because like this one has Laura.
It has Laura, exactly. Exactly. The last one had Nina.
Yeah. Act of War.
Well, the other thing just to say is like the Boston Tea Party stuff. Like, how cool would it be if we had a book where that worked? Like, that's what Steve Berry would do. He would take something like, I'm going to do the Freedom Trail, the Sons of Liberty, recreate the Boston Tea Party, and I will make it work. And like his character, Cotton Malone, goes on some awesome adventure. Here, it's just stuffed into like the Lydia Ryan, Laura. We have all these other things going on where that doesn't shine and it gets murky. So, yeah. Act of War.
Probably one of my least favorite. The only thing I really remember about this is the China piece, like the secret sleepers, North Korea, like that kind of stuff. This book is like super hazy to me. I feel like before, the one thing I want to do is to maybe go listen to our pod before, I truly make a ranking of this one because I just can't remember it.
I don't remember anything. Our notes, we had almost nothing in the notes. And I remember we picked up the team from North Korea. I remember it was cool that they like infilled and like, I don't know what they were doing. I don't know what their mission was. We know China was planning something.
But they had the whole, like with those,
well, they wanted to take over the US.
Yeah, exactly. They had these like farmer, like, right, mock cities that we were going in. And like, this is, again, Brad does this where he has, like in the last one, these 2 storylines that like barely touch at the very end.
Yeah.
You had this whole like with the kid, right? And the SEALs and, with the one CIA interpreter who like, wants to get this kid out, but then you have all the stuff that Scott's doing on the other side. So
well, that was the North Korea stuff, right? They found the kid and they wanted to save him. That's right. And there was a nugget maybe 2-3 books ago of Site 243 where they were training
it was brought
the
up
Americans.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of just never went anywhere in that book. And it took up until this one to figure out that I think they had them covered so satellites couldn't see what was going on. They were mocking up American cities. They were learning American accents to buy up land, come here. And then ultimately an EMP would go off and they release all those sleeper agents. The Snow Dragon, I think, was the plan.
Yep.
Yeah, maybe some cool concepts, but I remember that being a book that we didn't feel was executed perfectly. But then we come back with Code of Conduct. That's a sleeper.
It's a sleeper. I really like Code of Conduct.
It's a really good book.
the virus, the thing
book.
you're thinking it's like a vampire novel in the beginning. Like Brad, sort of gets you on the edge of your toes. You don't really know what this is.
They burned the clinic. There was
right,
and then remember there's a video, a 4-second clip that the people who burned the clinic were white Europeans, and they were speaking a language, and like this clip shows it wasn't just like a rebel attack, and it was the Russians, and that almost didn't get out. But I think his father and his son like risked their lives to make sure they got somewhere with cell service they could send this clip out. I remember that was really cool.
Yeah, we have this one of, I think, the better villains in the story, this Pierre Damien guy.
Sure.
Rich, eugenicist, anti-Israel propaganda. A lot of cool stuff with that. This whole idea of weaponizing Ebola, hemorrhagic fever. This is all stuff that's like super scary, that if you were actually able to do this stuff is real. I think that's some of the crazy stuff.
That's another one of those. Brad took a trope, which is depopulate the planet,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been done. Yeah.
Like that trope's been done, but he does it in such a unique way with Pierre Damien, who I remember being creeped out by. Like, he's too smart, he's too rich, he's too well connected, and oh shit, he might actually pull something off that can lower the population of the earth and have mass death and hysteria. And he does actually. It does get out, the hemorrhagic fever, then it's airborne.
That's how this book starts off, right? Like Scott taking Laura to like Alaska.
Right. Yeah. He's going to hold them up in Alaska. Oh, and then he has that moving moment where he tells Nicholas, like, I would bring you there. He asked Nicholas, he's like, what's your emergency plans, right? What are you and Nina going to do? What are you going to do to protect her? He's like, I got nothing. And Scott's like, I'll take you up to Alaska. You can come with us. I remember that meant a lot.
And in this one we get, because like the attack happens, Scott goes on this huge bender, like hunting down all of Damien's people. Like, he's in a really dark place. And like, this is what I thought I remembered after Spymaster, but no, this happens. Dark. Yeah, like, exactly. Yeah. But no, Scott has like 2 of these major benders.
It's true. About it. And it ends with him sitting with Padre Pio, who asks him, are you ready to clear your conscience? Are you ready to confess? And he sits with him for hours, I think. And Scott says, no. He said, maybe one day, Father, but not right now. I've got work to do, and I'm going to do more killing. I don't feel bad for it. Harvath was death, was a quote.
Yeah, there was.
What's upsetting, though, is that Lara was forgotten. So she came on strong 2 books ago.
Yeah,
and
that's...
This is where we're hitting that middle to... We're going... I think we've been through early Brad. We've been through mid Brad. Mid Brad, I think, is those swings and misses for like the faction that's just not hitting, the team ups. A couple of the one-offs, like Takedown was a one-off, Apostle was a one-off. So mid Brad is like really good, but not refined yet. He doesn't have a total voice. He's trying a big team up book. He's trying a traveling heavy book. He's trying an isolated one location book. And then we get into this like mid current Brad, where he's starting to have the same cast of characters stick around. The team ups are starting to be the same, but then Lara just like disappears. So we're hitting that phase where Scott goes out, does an adventure, but in the back of his mind goes, oh, what about that girl I really want to be with?
Yeah.
And we're hitting that stage where like for 4 or 5 books, he just thinks about her, but they don't actually progress.
Until Spymaster. Yeah.
Until shit goes down. And they never really find that time. They do get away on vacation a few times, but Reed Carlton finds them. I think one of them planted something on his cell phone. They find him on the beach, right? And bring him back into the action. Yeah.
So foreign agent.
Two more. Can I say 2 more things on code of conduct?
Oh, sure.
Dr. Jess Decker.
I think that was one of like the worst parts of this novel. That her, Scott's girls, if you want to like, or Brad's girls, whatever, like, interesting that he puts her in there.
Do you remember how hard she's coming on to Scott?
Oh yeah.
She's showering in the jungle.
In the jungle.
Wants him to
fly
join.
Virus. Yeah.
She was wild. She is a wild girl. She's, I would say, worse than Donatella. She's like
up there.
Insane, batshit crazy, but she's also the smart one because she's the doctor who they need at the clinic to talk about the disease.
But then she's like written off halfway through the book, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think she's just gone. There were a couple cool jungle scenes, though. I think one, she gets taken, and Harvath pretends to be the medical assistant.
Yeah,
Like
but she's a. I remember her like always getting in the way. That was what she. Yeah.
Well,
Unlike a
something up
Meg
top also gets in
Cassidy,
the way.
like who's getting in the way, but like would help Scott. She gets in the way and then like goes against Scott. You know.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy. But speaking of women, that's why I wanted to say one other thing. Well, first off, Brad called us out on that one. That was the episode where I read the passage of how she's described. And I said something like, let Brad be Brad, because he was writing about women and she's in her 30s and she's, drop dead sexy. And he really describes her shape, shall we say. But second one, there's another really cool woman character, Helena, who's undercover infiltrating Pierre Damien for Mossad.
Oh, right.
And remember, Mordecai is her handler. So they're actually like the good Israelis who ultimately work with us on intelligence. And it's almost like a cat and mouse. Mordecai running Helena. She's embedded dating Pierre Damien. And he's at some conference. And I remember they're at this like big mansion kind of house. But she gets found out. I just remember like really, really cool with her. And then she has to pass a flash drive with Damien's passwords to Sloan Ashby.
That's right. That's right. At the restaurant. Yeah.
At the restaurant in Winchester, Thai place. And she puts it in the bathroom, and Sloan Ashby and Scott are in the restaurant watching them the whole time. Oh, and then the property was Clifton. It was one of like George Washington's cousin's house or something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there's like the Malthus Society trying to depopulate the earth. And combine that with the virus. And one other thing, this book keeps moving up for me. The Chief Justice.
Oh, that scene in the
train station.
This is also like a little creepy before with like the suspension of civil liberties, like in this novel.
They're trying to lock down Scott, taking him to Camp Perry.
Right.
They want to lock him up in whatchamacallit.
Yeah, because they're putting together all like the special warfare, all the people that would be, cause the ruckus during these kind of times. So.
They have Main Core, a database where the first people that they want to round up in the first round of lockdowns is former vets, people who've posted things about freedom of speech, Second Amendment. Like they want to take all these dangers to society, who are the people who could protect us, and lock them up because they're trying to take away people's rights. And so there's one figurehead who is very popular, Chief Justice Lesht. And so he's one of the first people that they're trying to get on a quarantine train car to send him off somewhere for lockdown, basically, put him in a camp. And they have to set him free. And I remember the Amtrak cops end up helping. They go across the National Mall on a chase. Scott gets him into a boat on the Potomac River right off the mall. And then they escape. That was wild.
That was a cool scene. Yeah.
It's a cool book.
That book is rising.
That's a good book.
So the next two, use of force, foreign agent, use of force. These to me scream to get a guy, to get a guy, to get a guy, to get a guy.
They're forgettable, to be honest.
I will say that use of force was better than foreign agent.
I agree.
The only like positive I feel like a foreign agent was, we get Alexandra coming back, another like rehash of a character. But, to me, the use of force was cool with, going to these various nightclubs and, obviously we bring in, that fighter pilot, Argento.
He's the winner.
Yeah, I don't know.
Lentita, the Vatican intelligence.
Lentita, yeah, exactly.
Deborah Lovett, our CIA contact in Rome.
Yeah, those two novels they were so similar to me.
Do you remember, though, how promising use of force was when they're going after the mafia, flying around southern Italy, realize the attack is actually happening in Rome? They were kind of thrown off the scent. There's mortar teams set up around Rome who are going to hit the Vatican. Like, the suspense was building after a really long book.
Use of force let us down because they cut and scene
just ended
to the very end. Yeah.
They rolled up one mortar team, and then all of a sudden they go, we got the rest of them too.
Oh, we got all of them. Yeah.
We got them all. Use of force had potential, but unfortunately falls short because that ending. I was like, this is going to be a Rome book. Let's go. The Vatican. Remember they go into the Vatican archives and like nuns walking around with classified documents and things.
Mm-hmm.
And then it goes nowhere. Both books, Foreign Age and Use of Force, had promising villains who had interesting stories, but again are forgettable.
Yeah,
Sasha Basayev,
another one we thought was a great character, and then
Right.
when ultimately Scott had his one-on-one with Sasha, he's quickly dispatched.
Just
Like
kills
it
him,
wasn't, it wasn't very fulfilling.
But remember, his motives were like, there was some attack and they were burning down this gymnasium, and he watched his family die.
Yeah, he was like the ultimate, like, oh, I got converted. Like, yeah.
Then got radicalized to hate Islam, but wanted
Mm-hmm.
to infiltrate ISIS and became like a cleric, directing ISIS from the inside, even though he was trying to bring them down. And I think it was a Russian, like, Muslim breakaway region, Chechnya or one of those.
Chechnya, yeah.
Very promising, but I remember being like, it didn't end
Those had,
well.
very similar vibes and very similar, like, letdowns.
Because in Use of Force, it was Tursunov, the Tajik. And I remember the Tuileries attack. He was like watching the attack going off in Paris, getting off on it. I don't remember what happens to him. Like, I don't really care. Rest in peace, Argento, though. Great character.
Yeah, rest in peace.
Deborah Lovett could come back. I could see that. Something going on in Rome, or she got a promotion. Like, I could eventually see her taking over CIA or something.
Then we come to our most recent novels. We just did Spy Master, Backlash, two of our my all-time favorites. Flash, I'm pretty sure it's the best novel in this entire series. Spy Master, I remember when we revisited it, it's a very different novel than what I remember it, because once you know Backlash, like, Spy Master just is different. Yeah, and then coming out of Backlash, going into Near Dark, going into Black Ice, like seeing Scott's revenge tour, the establishment of Solvay, and then, our most three recent books, Rising Tiger, Deadfall, and then Shadow of Doubt, these one-offs, like wanting to tell like an interesting in the moment story, like Rising Tiger, like Belt and Roads, wanting to continue that Belt and Roads initiative by going to India. Yep. I remember some great secondary characters.
Good characters. Novel. That old man, Siddiqui was a different character whose house was on fire in an anti-Muslim attack. And again, this is where Brad's hitting that geopolitical streak, because Black Ice with the Arctic, Rising Tiger with like Hindu nationalists in India, and also Chinese economic might and influence, Deadfall, Ukraine commentary. I think this is finally where we're seeing modern day Brad and what he does best in these few. Not to mention Solvay's heavily involved, which is, we just kind of recapped a journey that Brad Thor went on crafting female characters. A lot of them misses, a lot of them question marks of, they came on great, you love them, he didn't know how to use them. He didn't know how they worked with Scott or interacted with Scott. Solvay is like the culmination of all that.
Sure. Yeah, for sure.
Like, it's not settled by any means. I know they're married, and or we're going to see, were they married in Shadow of Doubt?
Yeah, in Shadow of Doubt
when they were engaged. Yeah. Engaged in Deadfall then?
Engaged, yeah. No, I think they were engaged in Black Ice. I forget, but
every book is like taking a step in that direction, where I think Laura, we never really took those steps.
No,
Claudia Mueller, we just cut it off. Meg Cassidy, she disappears and goes get married. Like, he didn't know where to go with any of them. And now Solvay, you really feel something special. It's like the culmination of 23 books of Scott getting there and finding his love.
Well, it's cool. It's cool to go down this path and see that. So
yeah, Norseman comes. You said it. Norseman conquers the Norse.
Yeah,
you said it best.
All right. Well, I think that does a good job of refreshing our minds. I think we're going to be able to come back, give you guys some true in-depth insight into some of these categories we have: best villain, action sequence, traveling heavy, Scott's ladies, team ups. So, and then obviously our final rankings. So look out for part 2 of our pod, the final episode of the Scot Harvath Podcast. Before that, though, got to thank our patrons, including our special deputy director, Sherry F., our special operator, Jason C., our special agents, Ben, Daryl, Kevin, George, Matt, Don, Peggy, Mark, and Chris. Subscribe, rate, and review to all 3 seasons of No Limits. You can find us at thrillpod.com or on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, just let Scot be Scot.
Part 1 finale, just let Scot be Scot. Part 2 finale,
just let Brad be Brad.
We got to let Brad be Brad.
Yeah, exactly.
Perfect way to go.
I'm saving it.